Umbilicals.
Go.
Arm control.
Go.
ECS.
Go.
Redline monitor.
Go.
Quality.
Go.
Op safety manager.
Go.
ULA safety officer.
Go.
Vehicle system engineer.
Go.
Anomaly chief.
Go.
Range coordinator.
Clear to proceed.
Flight director.
Houston flight is go.
Starliner.
Starliner, go.
Launch director.
You have permission to launch.
Proceeding with the count. ALC. Verify T0 is set for 14:52:15 Zulu.
Verified.
All right, CBS News space consultant Bill Hartwood is back with us from the Kennedy Space Center. Also joining us is Andrea Lenfelder. She's a space reporter at the Houston Chronicle. So I don't know much about what we're listening to, but it looks like things are going in a positive direction.
Sounds like a go.
Yeah, talk us through what's happening right now as we get closer to launch, Bill.
Well, you know, they're coming up on ending this hold they've been in. It's going to start counting again at T-minus 4 minutes, and then it's an automated sequence down to launch. Now, if you remember, when we had our launch scrub a couple of days ago, that computer didn't pick up the countdown at the 4-minute mark, or rather the 3-minute and 50-second mark. Today, we're hoping things will go a little bit better. There have been no technical problems at all so far in this countdown, and Butch, Wilmore, and Sunita Williams in the Starliner capsule are ready to go.
Contingency plans are built into this launch. Can you tell us a bit about that?
All kind of contingency plans. You know, this spacecraft, just like SpaceX's Crew Dragon, has what they call a full envelope abort system, meaning they can abort safely. In other words, fly away from the rocket at any point from the launch pad all the way up to orbit. So there are no so-called black zones during the ascent. They've got away off the rocket at every single point. That's a very good thing for both types of spacecraft, and certainly something the crews appreciate.
And so the spacecraft will be headed to the International Space Station. What is their mission?
It's it's simple in concept but difficult in execution. You know, this is the first piloted flight of the Boeing Starliner. So Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams, his co-pilot, are going to really put the spacecraft through its paces. And the countdown just picked up at the 4-minute mark. And I'm going to stand by 1 second, and we're now past the point where they had a problem the last time. So that's good news.
Yeah.
So anyway, they're going to put the spacecraft through its paces. They're going to test all those systems to make sure it is working as planned. And if all that goes well, NASA hopes to certify this vehicle for operational flights starting next year to carry astronauts to and from the space station.
So, Andrea, can we talk a little bit about just how significant this is? You know, NASA has been for years now trying to a little bit offload the expense of these missions to private industry. But so far, they've only got one consistent client. So how important is it to get this thing off the ground and have a successful mission?
Oh, yeah, this is a big part of NASA's strategy moving forward because you know, it wants to have two systems that'll get us to the International Space Station because, as we've seen with Boeing, if there's one issue that grounds one of the rockets, you need another way to get up there. And so SpaceX has been flying for 4 years now, carrying crews to the International Space Station. So it's really important to NASA to get this second way up to the space station. And also, as NASA's moving forward, it's relying more and more on commercial companies like Boeing to own and operate this type of hardware. And so this is really just proving this model that NASA's relying on moving forward.
But so far, I mean, Boeing is tremendously over budget. And I don't know what the relationship is really between NASA and Boeing, but I imagine, you know, every time they get ready to launch and then they can't, there's got to be some expense for NASA as well. I mean, do we know how expensive this whole thing has become?
I don't have a dollar figure off the top of my head, but I know it's definitely over budget. Yeah. But it's still more affordable than if NASA were to build its own spacecraft, and that's kind of the end goal there. It's just to split this expense with these companies. But it's definitely over budget and behind schedule. There's no doubt about that.
So, Bill, describe to the audience what those astronauts will do once they arrive on the ISS.
Well, for Butch Wilmore, the commander, and Sunita Williams, his co-pilot, they're going to do more tests of the Starliner capsule while it's docked. They're going to make sure the systems work as they think they will when it's in a quiescent state. And then, of course, the real highlight comes at the end of the mission when they return to Earth. They want to test their manual control of this spacecraft, and then they re-enter the atmosphere and come down to a hard landing in the western U.S. So they're going to test all of that. They're really going to put it through its paces, make sure it really does work the way it's designed, and that should help pave the way toward launching these spacecraft on a routine basis starting next year.
All right, I think we're going to just stay a little quiet and dip into, it looks like we got just about a minute left, so let's dip into the coverage here.
Range green. 54. POP started.
It will trigger the launch abort system on Starliner and fire automatically. If that happened, the spacecraft would push itself away from the rocket a mile up and a mile out.
Atlas at flight, press.
Centaur at flight press. 25.
Status check. Go Atlas. Go Centaur. Go Starliner. Godspeed, Butch and Sunny.
Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. And liftoff of Starliner and Atlas V, carrying 2 American heroes, drawing a line to the stars for all of us.
Commander Butch Wilmore there, calling down to Mission Control here in Houston that the spacecraft has begun rolling into the right attitude for its ascent, and the Guidance Navigation and Control Officer here in the room seeing good data on that.
Starliner passing through max Q, or the point of maximum dynamic pressure where the forces of air friction are highest. Butch and Sunny will shortly be passing through Mach 1, where the speed of sound.
You got a good throttle up.
Starliner and Atlas looking good with speeds and attitude increasing as expected. Coming up in less than 20 seconds, the solid rocket boosters will run out of fuel and burn out.
Good SRB burnout. Good SRB.
Now that the fuel in the solid rocket boosters has been depleted, the Atlas main booster stage will be continuing its burn for about the next 3 minutes.
Good handle. Good handle.
That call, good handle, from Capcom Joshua Kutrick, indicating that the crew now has the ability to initiate an abort manually if needed. All looking good so far. Now 2 minutes into Starliner's flight and coming up on the solid rocket booster jettison at the 2 minute and 40-second mark.
CLG and net, good trajectory. CLG.
The solid rocket boosters have now been jettisoned after seeing Starliner through its first 90 seconds of flight. Team on the ground here confirming that it was a good jettison and that the vehicle's trajectory continues to look good. Now 3 minutes into today's flight.
right, we are just now 3 minutes and 38 seconds into the launch of the Boeing Starliner, the first crewed flight to space on that Boeing Starliner aircraft, which had been scrubbed twice before today. This is Andrea and Anne-Marie. Whenever, I don't care who's sending a spacecraft up into space, every time I see a successful launch and I see the aircraft lifting into space, I'm reminded not so much of the astronauts on board who are heroes, but just the fact that they are willing to sacrifice all to explore the outer reaches of our planet into space. They are, to me, explorers in the long line of explorers, going back to Leif Erikson and Magellan, and now these two and others who are doing something that most of us only dream of, and they're doing it to better civilization, not just a country or not just a place. Andrea.
Yeah, I mean, it's always incredible to see a launch, especially the first time. And this is only the 6th time that NASA astronauts have flown a new spacecraft to orbit. And Sunita Williams is the first female test pilot on one of these missions. And so there's just it's always amazing when you see these missions actually get off the ground and headed into space.
So, yeah, we have had sort of a bit of a bumpy ride. I wonder if for Boeing, it's about, as we know, when you think about Boeing right now in the news, a lot of the focus has been on its airline department, which has not been very good publicity. It must be particularly important for Boeing to get this right and to have a success on many levels.
Yeah, I talked to a lot of people about that recently, and it's definitely Boeing could use a win right now. This is a good win for them. I'm not sure how many people actually put together this launch with Boeing spacecraft, because I think the public's more attuned to Boeing as their planes. But, to see the Boeing symbol on a spacecraft, to see it go to space successfully, it's definitely good for Boeing's image at the moment.
And so how long will it take for the Starliner and those astronauts to board the ISS?
They'll reach the spacecraft tomorrow. They'll reach the space station tomorrow. So they're going to spend all day today traveling there, and then tomorrow, just after noon, they will be expected to dock with the space station.
Bill, give us a sense of how things are going. I know you've been listening in to Mr. Mission Control. How are things going?
Absolutely. It's gone by the book so far. Everything's happened right on time. The first stage RD-180 engine, that's a Russian engine, shut down on time. The stage fell away. It's now on the power of 2 engines in the Centaur upper stage, and that's proceeding smoothly as well. It's a planned 7-minute burn for this second stage. So in about 12 minutes after launch, they'll be in space, not quite yet in orbit, but in space. And then the Starliner will be released to fly on its own. So far, a textbook launch for United Launch Alliance's Atlas V rocket.
And how long will the astronauts... Oh, wait, the astronauts are not staying up there, correct?
Well, they're going to the space station.
Okay.
They're going to be there. This is about an 8-day-long mission, yeah. So it's going to take them a day to get to the space station. If all goes well, they'll dock tomorrow, just after noon, and then they'll spend several days on the station before coming home around June the 14th. So, again, it's very nice to see such a flawless launch after all the problems that you guys have been discussing that we've all been thinking about.
So, Andrea or Bill, whoever can sort of answer this, I'm kind of curious about the difference between SpaceX's approach and Boeing and the Starliner. If you could do it in at the 3rd grade level so we can all understand, what are the key differences between SpaceX and the Starliner?
Well, Andrea, I'll drop in real quick. The SpaceX Crew Dragon's been described as a flying iPhone. It has the touchscreen displays. It's very modern looking all the way around. The Starliner is a more traditional design by Boeing. There are actual switches that the astronauts flip. It's not the touchscreen environment. But on the other hand, the Starliner has some more capable manual controls. If anything goes wrong, the astronauts have more ability to control the flight path of the Starliner. So they're different spacecraft. They're designed to do the same things. They just do it slightly differently.
Yeah, and it was interesting because when you talked to Sunita Williams before launch, she was talking about how Starliner, the Boeing spacecraft, feels more like the shuttle cockpit and more like Orion. And so she said If I was a young astronaut wanting to go to the moon, I would opt for Starliners because it kind of felt more like the NASA's traditional design. But, just like Bill was saying, it's definitely a lot more manual toggles than the SpaceX design.
So, Bill, just remind our viewers what the significance of this particular aircraft is vis-a-vis all of the others that have launched over. Sorry, Andrea, I meant to ask this question to Andrea. The significance of the Boeing Starliner aircraft vis-a-vis folks who, well, of course, have been familiar with the NASA space shuttles, for example. Why is it so significant? Why is the entire world paying attention to this Boeing Starliner?
Well, the significance of this is just another way to get people into space, get people to the space station. NASA retired the shuttle in 2011, and for a while there, it didn't have a way to get its own astronauts to the space station, so we relied on the Russian Soyuz spacecraft. Both of these astronauts, Butch and Sunny, have flown on the shuttle and the Soyuz, so this is their third spacecraft. And they're really testing it out just as another way to get to the space station today, and eventually, the International Space Station will be retired and replaced by commercial space stations. And so we'll need commercial vehicles to get these astronauts to those commercial space stations. And so it's not yet clear, Starliner's future after the International Space Station. Right now it has 6 missions after this one with NASA. And but moving forward, we need vehicles like this so we can keep getting astronauts into space when the space station does eventually retire and gets replaced by these commercial space stations.
And Andrea, I want to ask you a little bit more about kind of like the long-term goal here. I listened to a really kind of interesting conversation earlier this morning about NASA. And what these people were sort of suggesting is that NASA was really supposed to be something akin to the FAA, more of a kind of governing body, not responsible for the actual sort of manufacturing and researching. And I wonder if that's ultimately where NASA is hoping to go with this, hopefully with kind of a competitive environment where there are multiple companies, pushing the envelope in terms of technology and getting as many people up into space as can pay for it.
So NASA wants to free up some of its resources so it can push farther, so it can explore. It wants to go to the moon, and then it wants to build a sustainable presence on the moon and go to Mars. To do that, it wants to free up this area right around Earth called low Earth orbit, where the space station just circles the Earth. And it wants to be one of many customers in this low Earth orbit. And so its goal is it provided some funding, it provided a lot of technical expertise and oversight. But its goal really is to pass the baton to commercial companies here in low Earth orbit so that NASA can continue pushing toward the moon and then on to Mars.
Oh, that's fascinating. I did not know that.
Bill, can you, we're about to see the engine cut off here. Explain the significance of that and what happens next.
Will do.
I'm not sure if Bill...
The Centaur upper stage has put the Starliner... I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Bill. Do your thing.
No, I was just going to say, with the Centaur engine shutdown that we just saw, the Starliner capsule, which is still attached, is now safely in space. So Butch, Wilmore, Sunita Williams are weightless. They're waiting for another couple of minutes before the Starliner capsule at the top there will be released to fly on its own. Now, they're not yet in orbit. They designed this trajectory specifically to be suborbital, and the reason for that is if they had some major problem that knocked out the Starliner's propulsion system entirely, the crew would still come back to Earth and be able to land. So about 15 minutes from the point they separate, they'll fire their thrusters in the Starliner to actually get in orbit. But so far, so good. They're in space. The vehicle has performed flawlessly as best we can tell, and so this mission's off to a good start.
Yeah, it certainly looks like it. Looks like everything is going according to plan. I want to kind of continue to talk about kind of the broader space mission. I think a lot of people are sort of asking, and Andrea, I'll ask you, why do we want to perhaps go back to the moon? Been there, done that. Why the push to get this stuff out of the way so that NASA can go even further?
Yeah, so the last time we went to the moon, it was really just to prove we could do it. So it was just a race. Astronauts only spent days on the surface. They didn't spend long at all. They brought back some science, but science was largely an afterthought to the overall mission. And so this time, NASA wants to go to the moon and create a sustained presence so that it can really bring home more samples and do more research and more science. And then there's all these possibilities that open up if you stay on the moon, like manufacturing in space. Can you turn the moon's soil into metals that can be used for 3D printing, spacecraft that could go in space? Or can you turn ice into, separate ice into rocket fuel? And then you could have rocket fuel you would make on the moon. And so there's a lot of science, and there's also a lot of economic possibilities that could come from going to the moon and then continuing on to Mars.
I'm told we're expecting a significant moment here in just a few seconds, so why don't we listen to Mission Control?
And about 10 seconds until an expected launch vehicle separation.
LV-SEP confirmed.
Good LV-SEP.
And now that Starliner has separated from this Centaur upper stage, we have a big thank you to our partners at ULA, providing Butch and Sunny a smooth ride to space.
That is not the end of today's orbit activity, though. The team will now be getting ready for the orbital insertion burn, which comes 31 minutes after flight. So that's still about 15 minutes away now. Sunny Williams and Butch Wilmore will be getting their tablets out and doing a few other activities to get Starliner ready for that. And that will be that will be the first in a series of burns that will set Starliner on its way to the International Space Station.
Bill Harwood and Andrea, if you're with us, explain the significance of the moment we just witnessed.
Well, the Starliner separation, that is the end of the launch phase of the mission in the sense of the job of the Atlas V rocket, which caused a couple of delays recently. Today, it went flawlessly. The Starliner is safely in space. The astronauts on board are now weightless. They're configuring their computer screens, laptops, not laptops, but display screens, to set up for what they're calling an orbital insertion burn. The rocket didn't put them directly into orbit by intention. They're now going to fire onboard thrusters to actually get into orbit. So that's another major milestone coming up in about 15 minutes. But, I can't state again how seemingly flawless this flight has been. It's really a welcome relief, I think, to NASA and the whole team that they've gotten this up into space with as few problems as we've seen.
I can only imagine the relief that everyone is feeling right now. Andrea, this is a long time coming. Final thoughts?
I think it's a.
We'll go Andrea, then Bill.
The dangerous part of the mission for the launch is past. Now they'll be cruising to the space station soon, and so it's great to see them in space, to see them headed to the space station. I can only imagine how the astronauts feel after sitting in the capsule 3 times trying to launch. This time it must just feel amazing to finally be on the way to the space station.
Okay, I think the crew is speaking right now. Let's dip in.
We all copy all and really appreciate the words.
And Houston Starliner, we are on the tablets and in insertion monitor.
Copy tablets, we're with you, insertion monitor.
So the crew have their tablets out, so no longer using the paper procedures now that the vehicle has stopped moving so quickly.
All right, back to final thoughts from you, Bill, first, and then Andrea.
Well, to me, the significance here is this is something NASA's been striving for ever since the end of the space shuttle program way back in 2011. They really wanted independent vehicles that could carry astronauts to and from the space station and also be available for commercial use if the company sees, can make that happen. But having these two vehicles is going to ensure that NASA can get astronauts to the station through the end of its life, by the end of the decade, I should say. And that's a big deal. That's something NASA's been striving for years. And with the success of this mission, assuming it continues to go well, they will finally have that capability. So that's a very big deal indeed.
Andrea Leinfelder, your thoughts?
I mean, it's always great to see a new spacecraft finally make it to this point where it's carrying crew into space. And they've got some exciting more tests to run as they approach the space station and as they come home. The landing will be exciting on actual soil instead of in the ocean. But it's definitely a very big moment for NASA and for Boeing as they get this new capability to get people to the space station.
All right. Bill, Andrea, thank you so much for guiding us through this. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you both to our contributors. We're going to keep it rolling after we head over to Times Square for an encore presentation of CBS Mornings. Stick around.
Coming up, our series. Wait a minute. Tom, is that you working the camera?
Keep leaning out of your close-up.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.